Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla, let's go over the market, let's talk about what happened today in a pretty bloody and pretty painful day in the market for the most part. Today was, of course, OPEX, which is essentially just pretty much means that there's a lot of options expiring. There's weekly options and monthly options expiring, so there's a lot of volatility, and in this case, there was a lot of painful volatility throughout pretty much the whole day. Just the whole day was just a slow bleed down for the markets across the board, ultimately, except for Apple, kind of. On top of that, there's also news about apparently a new coronavirus in China found that could be the start of a new pandemic or something. So I feel like the markets were just kind of spooked about that, combined with OPEX, and we get this little bit of a weird flush today. But nonetheless, we'll go over Tesla. I'll give you my thoughts, and yeah, let's just jump into it. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. And of course, if you do enjoy my thoughts, posts, technical analysis, updates, etc., well, I do share my thoughts with my members every single day the market is open for just $3 a month. The link is down below in the description of the video, where again, constantly share my thoughts, post updates, of course, mainly about Tesla stock in the first tier or the second tier for $5. I also talk about NVIDIA, of course, and sometimes I'll, of course, include other stocks as well. But nonetheless, yeah, jumping into it, Tesla closing the day down with a pretty decent underperformance. Well, I wouldn't say it's maybe an underperformance with QQQ down 2%, but a pretty painful day, I should say, down about almost 5% on the day, close to 5% on the day. I think the bottom of the day was pretty much 5% on the day. Yeah, 5.5. So pretty painful day across the board. Now, what does this actually mean moving forward, right? Is Tesla, is it all over? That's it. Is the bearish thesis currently, the thesis essentially, or is there still some bullish thesis, that can save the stock still, right? Well, on the bright side, or I should say the good news is the fact that there is still a bullish thesis. So we'll go over both sides as per usual, but let's start off with the bullish thesis. So what is the bullish thesis? Well, first and foremost, obviously, like I mentioned, if I go to the 15-minute chart here really quickly, you can see, as I remove this for now, I mentioned how, this channel did not work out whatsoever, but I mentioned how, yesterday, right, I said how, we're pretty much in this sideways range, right? We're in the sideways range right here, and essentially we want to, or at least on the daily it looks a little bit better, right? We want to essentially break below or above one of these levels, right? We mentioned how the upper level to break was about 362, 363, something like that, and the lower level to break was about that 347-ish, 348-ish range, right? That's what we mentioned yesterday. Well, unfortunately, we clearly picked a direction, right? The direction, of course, was to the downside, and just to show you, I honestly mistraded this. I actually exited my position that I bought earlier from 3.3 something, the 330s. I actually exited up here, but then I rebought way too early because I was hoping that it would be. It was a really bad mistake. I kind of got like almost FOMO in a way, but I was hoping it would be something like this where it would be essentially a massive bear trap. But instead, the market just was absolutely brutal today. But nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make is the fact that we broke down below, came back up, retested that range. You can see here that was, of course, a massive area of support for like a week or something like that. And then we, of course, turned it back into a resistance right here. You can see, and continue to flush down even further, which I made the right call initially. I just didn't follow my instinct, which was, hey, you know what? It is what it is. You live and you learn. Now, what does this actually mean though moving forward now, right? Is there still a bullish thesis on the kind of zoomed out time frame? Well, there is, right? And the reason is because, first and foremost, despite this pretty painful day in the market, Tesla is still making a higher low, at least as of today, which is a good sign. Now, there's a few other reasons why this level that we roughly closed at is actually pretty good, right? Is actually a pretty good level to close at. Why? Well, because first of all, we ended up filling this gap over here, which is good. Not only did we fill this gap, but we actually closed above the gap, which I like to see. Right now, obviously, it wasn't the most convincing close above the gap, but nonetheless closed above the gap, which is good, right? That is a positive for sure. There's no question about that. And leaving these gaps filled and not unfilled essentially is a good sign for potential continuation to the upside, right? It's better not having gaps like this down below. Now, of course, naturally speaking, we do have more gaps down below. For instance, this one down over here, but that's another story for another day. The point is that we filled this one, and that's a good sign. The second thing that's potentially a good sign is the fact that we actually reverted right back to the fibs. Now, I mentioned the fibs. Hopefully I mentioned them yesterday in yesterday's video, at least one of the videos recently. The first level, of course, the downside if we broke below 347, 348 was the 618 Fibonacci, which is around that 341, 342-ish range, which we did come to. And we actually stopped briefly around it intraday. Clearly not enough, right? So we went down to the smart money zone essentially, where it's like that true discount range, if you will, on Tesla stock, at the very least from this move up here, which is that 786, 826 Fibonacci level, which is pretty much around that 334 and change to as low as 332 and change, right? And that's exactly what we went to. The low of the day was 33442, which is almost to perfection, right, to that Fibonacci retracement level, which is good. So the fact that we held this level and held this gap fill is potentially a good sign for the bulls. Now I say potentially because naturally there's still work to be done. The bulls definitely have their work cut out for them. For instance, the first thing the bulls want to do, without question, in my opinion, is reclaiming this level that we broke down from today, right? This about 347, 348-ish level. That level needs to get reclaimed. At the very least, I expect us to come back up to retest that potentially as early as Monday or Tuesday or something. But I do want to see the bulls reclaim this level, right? Because this level becomes pretty important now, right? We need to reclaim this level. And if we can, I actually will view that as a pretty bullish catalyst to make our way potentially back up to the trend line resistance all the way up here, which, let's say it happens next week, still in the 370s. This time it'll be the lower end of the 370s. So that is going to be that more bullish perspective on Tesla stock. And on the weekly, we are still roughly, though not convincingly, holding around this market bias type situation. And the RSI on the daily chart is starting to, on the weekly chart, I should say, is starting to peek its head into oversold territory, which doesn't happen very, very often. The last time we got into oversold territory was when we were selling off pretty aggressively all the way down to the 150s. We haven't peeked our head into oversold territory on the weekly ever since this massive sell down over here, which can imply there is more selling pressure, of course, but based on the daily chart, at the very least, I would expect us at least some level of a bounce to retest that 347, 348 level. If we can recapture it, good. If we can, and we clearly show it as a resistance, not so good. And that would mean that at the very least, we'll come back down to get a potential double bottom here at 326. But unfortunately, while we remain below this 326, or I should say 347, 348-ish range, and this is where we start getting into the more bearish thesis, a move back down to the bottom of the kind of channel slash wedge, if you will, becomes a very real possibility, right? Which, let's say it happens sometime, I don't know, early March or something like that. This can take us back to 300, or if it happens, let's say, longer, and we kind of slowly bleed down, maybe zigzag more throughout or something like that. And let's say it happens towards the, maybe the middle of March or something like that. It will bring us back down to about the 280s, right? That unfortunately becomes a real possibility right now. And we mentioned this whole time, right? Unfortunately, we didn't get the pop up as high as I was expecting. I thought it would go a little bit higher than at least this candle over here at about 367. I actually thought we'd peak our head into 370s, and we still could, right? Even from this right here, that still is a possibility, naturally, don't get me wrong. But the overall truly zoomed out version is the fact that, well, we're still in this kind of descending channel slash wedge type situation. And until we break out of this, really this red line, ultimately, technically speaking, the move to the downside is still the one with more strength overall, right? Despite, even if we get this move to the upside of 370 or so, technically speaking, we can still retrace back down to 300 or even 280, right? That still is a valid move essentially to expect, if that makes sense, right? Again, the only way to truly either eliminate it or at the very least reduce it substantially is while breaking above this kind of 370s-ish to as high as 380 range, which of course will also break out of this downward channel slash wedge, which again, we have obviously not done yet. And until that's done, you can't fully discount the possibility of still making an ultimate lower low all the way down here. Now, again, nobody knows for sure, right? Nobody knows which one will happen. Nobody knows. So that's why you want to, proceed with caution ultimately, right? Until at the very least we break above this, because again, those projections very much still exist. Now, the fact that we held this level here does show some potential signs and almost like the light at the end of the tunnel for the bulls here, to make a move from here. But we'd want to see a reaction from this area sooner than later to make our way to the upside. So let's see how it plays out, right? Let's see how it plays out. Obviously, even more reason to expect potentially down here ultimately, or at the very least, like very low 300s is essentially breaking that low that we set just about a week and a half ago, which is about that 325-ish range, right? If we lose that 325-ish range, we'll most likely make our way further down, ultimately closer to that, the actual lower end of the 300s. So again, it really comes down to a level by level type situation here. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen next. We can't for sure say this was the bottom yet, especially after today's price action, right? It does give a bit more, added, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? It makes the bear case more valid and, pronounced, I guess you can say. So, just keep that in mind, right? Again, I've said this many times, as long as we're technically still within this downward channel slash wedge, don't expect anything higher than 380, right? Don't expect anything much higher than that, like 370s, 380. Don't expect anything higher than that. That's like the best case scenario until proven otherwise, and we get a confirmed breakout. It's ultimately that simple. So let's see how this plays out moving into next week. I do think the markets essentially created max pain today. The market's definitely kind of puke their brains out today, to be completely honest with you. So let's see how we ultimately play out moving into next week. And hopefully OPEX and this kind of coronavirus fears essentially subside, because there's a lot of other stocks that I am watching very closely that I have been talking about, the members that have entered some pretty oversold territories. Like Google is pretty good, right? Definitely enter some oversold territories. You can see old resistance. In theory, hopefully here it becomes new support, even on the weekly as well, you can see, right? So that's something to watch out for. And of course, it's also entering my oversold bands on the almost passing the tier 2 now, which is not often something that happens on these mega cap stocks. And Amazon is an even further crazier version of it, where it's well below the Bollinger Bands, and it's also at the tier 3 level of my oversold conditions on my second bands, you can see as well, with RSI pretty much scraping the bottom of the barrel at 13. Again, my RSI settings are more aggressive, but the point I'm trying to make is the fact that Amazon, with nice little reversion of course on the weekly, it rarely touches the third tier, the red line at the bottom of the bands here. Very rarely does that touch. If I zoom out, you can see it's only touched that in the last very long time. If I do it up to here, let's see, 2024, something like this right here, right? Bam, something like this. It did it here, right over here once, and then it did it twice, and then 3 times. In the last year of trading, even more than a year, arguably here, a year and a half almost of trading, there's only 3 other times really where it touched the bottom line of the the oversold bands, right? And now we're pretty much on number 4 now, right? So again, just do with that information as you will. Obviously nothing is perfect, but the point I'm just trying to make, and the reason I'm bringing up Amazon, is the fact that the markets are definitely a little bit, or at least some stocks in particular, are definitely a little bit on the more oversold side. So it would be pretty hard not to expect at least some level of relief potentially as early as next week. But again, you never know. Sometimes the market likes to be very, very annoying. So let's see how it plays out. But yeah, that's kind of my overall thought process. In terms of Tesla on options flow, you can see some nice call flow came in towards the end of the day for next week's expiration. Some decent call flow you can see over here, right? 100K, 174, 400K, 300, 335,000 for next week's expiration, which is a nice sign to see. So that's always a good sign. But yeah, let's see how it ultimately plays out moving into next week. Yeah, I mean, Tesla confirmed 15 million bearish flow, but again, what I like to usually look at is how the options flow look towards the end of the day, moving into the rest of the week, or next week in this case. So, and bullish flow did come in, so I do expect a bit of a bounce, but again, the levels to watch out for. Don't fully discredit the fact that we can potentially get closer to $300 per share, maybe even worst case. I think worst case is 280, but that's the worst case scenario, but that is a scenario. So let's see how it plays out. Don't be stupid. Don't go into some random short-term calls and hoping you can make it big. That's how you wipe your accounts. I'm personally just slowly buying shares. I have shares still pretty much where we closed at, actually. That's from when I bought back here. I'm pretty much break even on them again, even though I was up over here. So I'm pretty much break even on them again. But I did sell cash secure put lower, right? I think I sold the cash secure put for, I think I sold a 320 or something like that for 2 weeks out. Or was it 317? I think it might have been a 317 and a half 2 weeks out, something like that. I don't know. I sold the cash secure put. I'm willing to buy lower. I will buy more down here. It's fine if we get there by that time. If not, I'll collect the premium, and the shares I have, I'll write them up. But yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow or Monday. Peace.